Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm really sorry for being late. Let me briefly introduce our participants. Carlo Castelli, City Planning and Design Director, ECOM. Liu Taiker, Center for Livable Cities Director. Dmitry Narinsky, Head of International Academic Laboratory of Experimental City Planning of Urban Studies High School, named after Vysokovsky. Miguel Kona, President and Director General of Michi Creative City Designers. Bakhtibai Taitaliyev, Deputy Head of Astana Genplan R&D Institute. And finally, Yu In, Chief Engineer of Chunsin City Planning Department. First of all, let me again welcome all our guests and remind you that we have 5-6 minutes per each presentation. First of all, let me pass the microphone to Carlo Castelli, City Planning and Design Director of ECOM.
I hope everything works technically, but I think I can hear my voice. First of all, I would like to thank Moscow Urban Forum for me to be here. It's a pleasure, it's an honor, and also it's a pleasure to be here part of this distinguished panel of experts in the field of urban planning. And we have an interesting task today to understand and exchange ideas about how urban planning nowadays is facing some challenges, urgent challenges and opportunities as well, I would say. And also how the transient character can be captured and embedded into a path. Secondly, I would like to reassure everybody that I'm not checking my emails, but I just have a few notes on my phone, so try to be as technological as possible. Think about the context, which was one of the main items of the question. I think I would like to highlight a few elements of this very interesting area that we are living into. Some call it the urban era, the urban age. The urbanization is one of the topics of the mainstream magazines and newspapers. So cities are all over the place, and they are the topic of the century. Cities are facing an unprecedented challenge, an unprecedented competition amongst each other, but at the same time they collaborate a lot, and the Moscow Urban Forum is an eminent example of this collaboration. Secondly, there's an element of growth which is very important. Nowadays, cities which grow generally win. Who grows the most win in general. Of course, we need to understand the quality of the growth, the sustainability of the growth, and understanding how that growth can be sustained over time. And thirdly, I would say growth can be achieved either by natural growth, by immigration, but also by systemic structuring of a city or a mega region through infrastructure. So, for instance, the work that we've done in London with the manifesto for London 2065 was actually, amongst other things, trying to understand how the existing infrastructure, the existing structure plan of the London that very often is measured in 8.75, 9 million people, is actually 20 million people if you take into consideration Milton Keynes, Oxford, Cambridge, Brighton, and the wider region. And that's effectively London. People nowadays commute up to 2 hours either way to be in London. So that's the context. In terms of mega cities, so obviously growth leads to have many mega cities now defined in the world, but at the same time, the definition of those megacities is still blurred. It can be defined under a number of parameters. One could be economic zones that somehow, as I said, London, people commuting, somehow define what the real London is. It could be morphological, where density is higher and then decreases towards the edges. It could be administrative, and of course the administrative boundaries are fundamental, but also environmental. We don't want to take a riverbed and kind of break it down with admin boundary and kind of break out the correct ecological management of that river. There are alliances, new models of governance as well. Moscow and St. Petersburg now are linked by a high-speed connection, and somehow that's a huge agglomeration, urban agglomeration. London and Paris, are they two different cities or maybe one mega region? Interesting topics. I think the mega region also offer the opportunity to widen the offer of different dimensions and lifestyles and job opportunities, and of course innovation as well. And it's interesting to know that when the administrative entity doesn't really manage to capture these mega regions or these mega regions or these entities, sometimes other entities intervene as a proxy. For instance, it's interesting how TfL in London is actually a governance element of the city, or the transport authority in Frankfurt, for instance. And of course, growth is about people, is about connecting people, is about bringing people together, attracting talents, making them mingle and exchange and innovate. And it also is about economies of scale. Of course, we want to agglomerate because we can achieve economies of scale that can support and underpin infrastructural strategies and development. But of course, growth is about people if we really engage communities. We were in Milan last year, which is going through a number of transformation areas, particularly some rail sites in the city centre that are undergoing transformation. And we, within a broader process, we organized a workshop open to the city, which was attended by 2,000 people in 3 days. And over the 6-month period of the consultation, 60,000 people have been involved in the decision-making process. That's very, very important. And of course, the key role of infrastructure as a connective tissue for megacities, which excuse me, which leads to the fact that time, not space, is the measure. So, excuse me. So, which terrible cold, which caught me yesterday. Sorry. So, which tasks are we facing? I think first of all, the context requires us to set out a vision for our mega regions, which goes through. It's not an abstract vision, but it's actually a very measurable and quantifiable vision that has to set out objectives, principles, and key performance indicators that can be measured over time and reassess to guarantee flexibility. At take-home, we believe that the cities that position themselves for success are those pursuing broad integrated strategies, looking at the various dimensions of growth and able to tap hidden value to attract investment and talent, and doing it in a number of reasons, in a number of ways. For instance, I make an example. Environmental or seismic emergencies, all the work that we are doing at the moment in Istanbul with the Metropolitan Authority to really understand and devise a strategy for seismic and environmental emergencies, there actually can be looked at opportunities in terms of creating value for real estate that can be then reinvested in infrastructure and long-term resilience. So we kind of summarize at AECOM the task under 4 big categories. First of all, prioritize. We need to understand the capital asset management, understand the status of infrastructure, and prioritize where to spend money to really kind of keep the system going. For instance, the work that we do in San Francisco with the public utility company that has been able to build green infrastructure for millions of people. The second task is plan. Of course, we need to minimize risk. We need to face the challenges that climate change poses and understand how to spend wisely and creating value through those investments. The third one is provide. In the next few decades, there are going to be trillions of dollars spent on infrastructure globally. We need to spend that money wisely to support jobs, innovation, healthy lifestyle, quality of life, etc. And of course, partner with advocacy organizations, with universities, with institutions, and this is a clear example of how to create long-term commitment, create value, and affordability. Affordability is very important. So just a couple of final points. From a technological point of view, of course, big data and our ability to manage it is very important. And from a legal point of view, to my mind, the definition of governance model for these mega regions are absolutely critical. And there's no silver bullet. It should be always ad hoc to really adapt to the local context. Thank you very much.
Спасибо, Карло. Я передаю слово.
Thank you, Carlo. Let me pass the microphone to Liu Taiker, Center for Livable Cities Director.
Yeah, PowerPoint. So let me just proceed. That's me, and I'm here as the chairman of Center for Livable City. And the reason I talk about urban planning was I was the chief planner of Singapore and also in charge of public housing. Now, just to show how far I travel, 9,000 square kilometers, and also show Singapore as a country compared with Moscow, well, very small. But sometimes we think small is beautiful, so we can get a lot of things done. Anyway, earlier on, when we received your messages, these were the key words for this session: mega projects, state-of-the-art construction technologies, and urban management. So I will deal with these 3 issues, but focusing on the last one, the urban management practice. Now, mega projects, because as our city becomes bigger, the project will become bigger. But looking from an urban planner's point of view, no matter how big the mega projects are, it must be related to the bigger urban environment and not just treat it, because no project should be an island, in my view, if you want to have a good city, because city is a mega integrated system, and it's not a collection of unrelated islands. So if the unrelated islands don't function well, don't relate well together, the city becomes an urban junkyard, and that creates a lot of urban problems. So it's important that the projects must be related to a master plan. So, for example, recently I did a project in Xixian, it's an ancient city. The client wanted me to do that purple project, just about 8 or 9 square kilometers, but it is a central business district. I said, well, I have to really relate this to the surrounding. So he said, okay, we've got 870 square kilometers for you to plan. This is already after planning. I said, but I have to relate this to the existing cities. I said, okay, I'll let you plan for 2,000 square kilometers. So that's how the plan is produced. Because by doing so, then the central business district can become effective. and also help people to reach into the city with the expressway for the metro lines. So after having planned this, and we'll go into detail, we look at that means after that we'll look into detail, to plan in more detail the individual parcels. And also in the system, in the process, I discover an axial line from the top, the new central business district, to an old ruin in the south about 2,500 years ago. It becomes an axial line of 14 kilometers. And after that, we'll look at the central business district. Eventually, we'll look at the central business district to see how it relates to the bigger city. And okay, just to cut a long story short, this is the central business district. And construction technology, the second topic. In my view, technology is of course important, but technology cannot replace good design. Good design, sensible design, user-friendly design are still very important. And technology can enhance good design, but not the replacement of human intelligence. And this, I see this as a danger in today's world. For example, this is high-tech, okay? Can you see what it is? It's simple lift buttons in the elevators. Now, for my age, to look for this elevator button, I have to put very, very close to see the number. Can you see the number? But after you press, the light lights up, then you see the number. That means when you need to see the number, you can't see it. When you don't need the number lights up. That means it's a poor use of technology. We don't use human intelligence to use technology. And on a small thing like this, we have this problem, let alone doing a big building, architecture, or doing a whole city. So we must think carefully, have good design, have faith in human intelligence. So with that as a kind of temporary conclusion, so I feel that how do we manage cities? To my mind, good urban practice from centuries ago until today is still the same. It's a matter of knowing what were the good practice in the past. And we must know the total process of planning. We must know the correct approach. We must understand the basic human needs of the city. And after you do this, then you use technology. And I call this intelligent planning, just like you have to intelligent design for architecture, intelligent design for lift buttons, intelligent planning. I think human intelligence should always be number one. So let me just show you what I mean. First of all, in intelligent planning, one is you must understand the good relationship between government and the private sector. First of all, what is the planning process? Have we thought through what should be the planning process from left to right? Since there's a lot of time constraint, I will not go into detail. The green area is the government's job. The government must lead. The black area is private sector's job. The government must lead, but when the city is planned, then in architecture and so on, then we leave it to government, to the private sector, and don't make unnecessary interference. So just quickly, and then the government consists of the politician in the green area and the pink area professionals, and they must work very closely together. So this is healthy, but in reality, most cities would do this because the government is so interested in the architecture, in the urban image. So the government spends most of the energy on architecture, on urban image, and not doing urban planning. So when you are not doing enough urban planning, and the businessmen need some guidance, what do? They tell the government what they should do. So a lot of city plans were not planned by the government, it's planned by the private sector. But the private sector doesn't have an overview. So this is a big problem, the common problem of most cities. The second thing I want to say is that the key approach, because in development, we plan for today in small area, then we go for tomorrow, then we go to bigger area. But in city planning, we must plan from far to near, and then from big area to small area, like the example I showed you earlier. That Xi'an city, I planned for them 50 years, okay, for 12 million people, and cover the whole, and then plan the smaller area. So far to near, big to small, we plan the function and then the image, not the image and the function. And also, we plan for the needs and not the capability. Okay, so.
We have four more speakers.
Yes.
Could you just summarize?
I'm summarizing it here. So we must know the key approach. We must understand the human needs. We must plan for long term, for the need and not for capability. And also, no matter how complicated our current society is, we must plan for the city to be simple to use and not complicated to use. This, to me, is a goal of the city. Okay, then I'm going to skip this. What are the considerations, just to summarize. For good urban planning, we must have the value of a humanist heart, the head of a scientist, the eye of an artist. Then you create a good city. Thank you.
Спасибо большое за прекрасную презентацию. Я попрошу спикеров.
I will now ask the speakers to focus on the key topic, and now I give the floor to Dmitry Narinsky, who will share with us what is the current situation in urban planning in Russia. Well, first of all, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that urban planning itself, the thing we are discussing today, is a young phenomenon in our country. Until recently, and still now, in a sense, we use another term, which is called gradostроительство or city construction, constructing cities. So, specifically, the construction is one of the key components in our understanding of the notion, not the planning thing. But what we are seeing now is a shift in attitude, and it's very telling and very important. We are now indeed shifting from constructing cities to urban planning. And in that sense, the organization of urban planning itself is the key problem, in my view. We have a master plan. Well, we have a general plan, not a master plan. Well, master plan is another notion. We could say that this is a general plan or a structural plan of the city. It is a document which is designed for a long time perspective in our legislation, at least for 20 years or more. At the same time, the city, Moscow, is very active in implementing infrastructural projects that are normally implemented in a short period, or they are designed for a short period, from 1 year to 3 years. Those infrastructural projects transform the city image in a more intensive manner than any general plan could ever do, or any kind of strategic document. I believe the current situation is the following. We have the key problem that there is a huge gap between strategic documents, instruments, and the operative, functional level where the city is actively transformed. Well, there are two extremes. One is being articulated for 20 years ahead, the other for a very short period. So there is a link missing, the mid-term planning. In Soviet times, we knew that very well. A plan from 5 to 7 years, 5-year plan is optimal. The Soviet Union lived in 5-year periods, and this 5-year planning, to my mind, was much more efficient than what we have now. The challenge that we face now is to form a mid-term plan And in this sense, I think the discussion that we often hear about master planning in Russia, they should eventually articulate a new kind of document, mid-term plan, that probably will be the master plan. It could occupy and close this gap, where the forecast would be for 5-6 years, while the same document would implement strategic vision functions and be the foundation for operational planning. Well, that was my key suggestion. Well, thank you, Dmitry. Miginago Kono, the floor is yours.
Inviting me and giving me this opportunity. I'm an expert in smart cities, and so I'd like to talk about urban planning from the smart city aspect of the project. And this is a short historical review of the smart city. The word smart city were started used in 2008 or something, and then afterwards, at that time, most of the smart cities were more energy saving or ICT driven concept. And after a couple of years, the municipalities, the government, local government disappointed at this concept because they didn't provide new services or new value for the city. And afterwards, in recent years, I found that the smart cities have regained the power or momentum in the United States and in Europe, and the players have changed. And this showed that how the players changed, and at the beginning, the central government gave the grants or subsidy to the municipalities, and the municipalities were kind of reactive. But now municipalities are quite proactive, and the federal government do not direct grants, but they support the assistant functions. And also the municipalities found that the use of young talents like startups and ventures are more effective in developing the applications rather than asking for the major ICT companies. So, and also the communities of residents and grassroots activities have the very strong influence to the municipalities. That the change of the roles of the stakeholders among central government, local government, people, and industry and university. And I'll just skip the details. And another aspect of the recent smart city, that smart cities are considered as the cities to create innovations. And for creation of the innovation, it is important to make people meet together or talk to each other. So, thanks to this, the new ICT technologies like laptop and the tablets and the smartphones, you can use mobile devices everywhere as far as Wi-Fi is provided. So, just think of the offices. Offices in the past is enclosed in the buildings, solid buildings. But now you can work outside of the office, and so the streets have become your office. And so the recent trend in the street planning is to make the sidewalk very wide, placing benches and other tools so that the people can work in the street. And while you are working in the street, you can meet other people and talk to other people, which will create the innovation or creativeness at least. And so this means that this is not only for offices, but the schools or even hospitals can be melted down from the solid building into the city streets as well. And that one of the phenomenon which is changing the cities with the new technologies and the new way of life, which is facilitated by the development of the technologies. And so now I will finish this slide. That once you are, and in the urban planning, the modeling and the forecast by sampling data is very important in the conventional way. But now using the IoT and big data, then the forecast and modeling has become much more accurate. And at the same time, you can readjust your plans while you are developing or constructing the city using the real-time data. So the really smart cities are cities that can change themselves while they are being developed, while after the every function has become active. And also the new technologies of building can allow us to develop the vertical rooms. And so the mixed use of the land is a kind of fashionable trend in the recent development of the cities. But this is very much sustainable in the case of in terms of sustainability and environment friendliness. The mixed use is very effective because you don't need the transportation too much, and so this kind of new technology like IoT and big data and also virtual reality can assist you to stay or to exist in different places at the same time. But once as the development of the virtual reality improves, for the human beings, the reality must has more value than virtual things. And so the location of in the city is kind of multifunctional, but the city must have the kind of attractiveness which really attract human beings in reality.
Окей, спасибо большое. И я хотел бы...
Thank you very much. Let me pass the floor to Bakhtibay, who will tell us about Astana experience. Can you please give us the key and the core essence? Thank you very much. I'm glad to welcome you all here at the forum, here at the place where so many great ideas are shared. Astana Expo, the Expo 2017 is being hosted now in Astana. There are so many people all around the city, and it seems to me that this is one of the benefits of the proper urban planning. Kishi Kurakawa, the Japanese architect, won the tender for urban planning a few years later, who actually focused the urban planning at metabolism, which is actually stands for transformation of the territory and its functionality, which is still actual in most of the cities, including Astana as well. And the so-called combination is found in our city map. It has some radial planning, but still it has some line planning across the city. We're talking about the parks and green territories. The city is becoming multipolar. We are now adding new districts added to the original historical center. There is the so-called new city, and another third center is being developed now. There are 4 more centers distributed all around the city. They have been planned already. They are mainly focused at business and at city authority to have this kind of territory diversity. We really focus on greening the city, which should be, and this concept should be really clear to the architects and the developers. We are forming up recreational areas in order to so that they should provide all the diversity of Kazakhstan nature, and we are trying to create more smaller parks which will be affordable, which will be accessible from any district of the city. The definition of agglomeration lies still far away from Astana. Still, this process is the growth of the city is really interconnected with the current planning policy, and resource necessity and resources demand as well as human demands are the 2 focuses that we base our urban planning upon. So we are focusing at satisfying the demands of the downtown and the suburban areas. We are talking also about food consumption. The second result that we are proud of is that we closed all the construction materials development sites, such as sand and others, in order to improve the ecological situation. We are also focusing on the recreational function of the city. Logistic centers, industrial centers are being developed as well. We started greening the city from building new parks around the city, new green areas, and now we are aiming at connecting those park areas with the forest and suburban areas. Thank you very much. Liu In, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I'm from Xixian city. I represent the city planning department. We are engaged in the matters of general planning. I'm very proud to be here. Chunxin is a huge Chinese megapolis. Currently, we are actively developing the urban planning model. Since population migration is considerably high in Chunsin, it becomes one of the main challenges. Chunsin is one of the biggest territories, one of the biggest megapolises in China. During the Second World War, it was one of the key transferring areas for the total area is around. It makes a few thousand square kilometers, and around 5% of the city is held by different natural objects. The total population is 3 million people. Currently, Chunsin is one of the biggest Chinese cities, and talking about the concept of one belt, one road, Chunsin is also following this concept. A new line is being built, a new route is being built through Chunsin, which will head to Russia and through Mongolia and further to Eurasian states. Each year, we are witnessing an increase of population by 300,000 people. So it challenges us to build the total housing area by 400,000 square meters. Speaking about the development of such big cities as Chunsin, there are four main goals. First of all, the environmental situation is far from being good. We have rivers and mountains, which are the natural beauties of the area. So we are now trying to interconnect the humans, the citizens, with the nature, so that they can admire and really enjoy the nature. That's how we are trying to create a brilliant ecosystem within the city. Secondly, we are placing humans at the first place. We learned Tokyo experience, the experience of building high-speed railways and all of the city infrastructure. This is how Tokyo managed to create a totally well-formed up city with a very well-developed transport system. Thirdly, we are actively using the new devices, new electronic devices, and other different IT technologies, applications, and bank cards that can be used within the city.
We also regularly assess what is being done. Fourthly and lastly, well, while planning cities, there is an important aspect such as legal framework and laws and regulations. All of our plans are based on firmly based on current rules and regulations. While forming this legislation framework, we invite experts and members of the public to help us with their initiatives. In terms of damaging to the environment, well, it is all also regulated by the law. Well, that was what I wanted to share with you, and I hope it was useful for you. While drawing the conclusions, I would like to thank our esteemed guests for their presentations and mention one important thing, which is indeed managing or governing cities and agglomerations is a huge challenge. There is an opinion that people are capable of creating megalopolises but are often incapable of governing them. megalopolises might have their own drivers, and a human needs a lot of will and a lot of intellect, because in times of automation, globalization, to be able to manage, govern, and leave a heritage to the next generations, leave them the cities in good shape. So in this sense, the experience of our Eastern colleagues is very important, because there are huge projects in China and very successful Singapore practices. Well, specifically in controlling and implementing mega projects, this experience might help us and might be very close to us, to the city of Moscow today, that is now beginning to implement a program of replacing housing. Well, not every Western city does that. It's not an evident trend for Europe either. So specifically this kind of experience of a very careful planning, careful researching of the current context, this continuity that you mentioned, the quality which is absolutely vital for those neighborhoods to never be reorganized and replaced again, well, that is all highly in demand. I thank our guests, and I also inform you that there will be a round table about the renovation right here after our panel ends.